Greetings and welcome to the Assignment 3 preview for this class. My name is Professor Kevin Matthews and I'm the professor for HRM 300. If you're not one of my students, this really is tailored more or less for my students. But if you learn something from this, then we're good for that too. But this is primarily for the students. So again, folks, this is Assignment 3 and we're going to be evaluating disparate impact and employee selection. And they talk about how this is just a continuation of the parts of assignments 1 and 2. We're going to go to the assignments 3, where they're going to really talk a little bit about the disparate impact and how it gets taken care of. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about what the assignment is. Actually, let me just jump into that right now. Yeah, so the assignment is going to be that we're going to have, the task should include, they say 2 to 5 pages in length. I don't really care. You can do it whatever length that you feel like you need, but they want you to do double-spaced, use tables when needed, not primarily, and also use APA format for the referencing and citing. Let me talk to you a little bit about APA format. APA format is also for how we build the paper overall, and and it's going to get into formatting. But the formatting of APA papers is Times New Roman, 12-point, double-spaced. And the reason why we do that is that way we get everybody to be playing on the same page when they're doing these assignments. And so we want to make sure that we're following the rules. Like I said, I was fanatically impressed with the way that Assignment 2 went. I hope that it gets to continue to move forward into the good direction that we've been going into, and I'd like to see that happening. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have you, for Part A, they're going to have you evaluating the selection system that you've done. So you've created a selection system, and what they're going to do is they're going to say that there's 2 different types of discrimination, disparate treatment and disparate impact. And now, look, when I was studying for the PHR exam, they didn't use these terms. And so if you're working in the field of diversity or human resource and you've been doing this for many years, you probably heard the terms disparate impact versus adverse impact. Those are the terms that I'm kind of used to. When writing the paper, please use the terms that they're actually using in this paper. That way we kind of keep everybody on the same page. Although if I do see a slip for adverse versus disparate impact, I understand that. So they talk about disparate treatment discrimination, which refers to treating applicants differently based on protected characteristics. For example, age, sex, national origin, or religion. And I kind of talked about this in a previous video, and I referred to it as the adverse impact. But basically what that is like, maybe I'm one of those, I'm a conceited guy, and I just think, women shouldn't be in the workforce. I want them at home. They shouldn't be working with me, so I'm sure as heck not going to have a woman running any part of my organization. That is definitely discrimination. That's binary. That is 1 or 0, and it's definitely 1, where 1 normally means yes. That would be a very sickening thing to have happen in the organization, and as a result of which, it's obviously illegal. There's not really a whole lot of tests you're going to be able to do that. You could use the 4/5 rule to kind of see if this is taking place, and courts will probably start with that. But then usually during the investigation, what will end up happening is they'll come to the understanding through witness interviews. Mr. Jones is, he's a sexist, and he doesn't believe that women should be in the workforce, and so he's never going to select a woman to run things. And by doing that, obviously, he would be in a lot of trouble. And if he's the owner of the corporation that's doing this, not only he's going to be in trouble, but the corporation's going to be in trouble too. Disparate impact discrimination is considered unintentional. This is where we would call this disparate impact. And I've kind of talked a little bit in the past class where it's insidious. It kind of happens, and it's not really happening because somebody is sitting down and saying, okay, well, I think all women should be staying home. What's happening is that they're putting up requirements for a position, and what's happening is that it's unintentionally keeping out certain people. For example, if I put up a requirement that, well, actually, let me step back. Remember when we talked about the restaurant that we were I was gonna hire a manager for, and I tell them that I want a college degree in order to run the restaurant. But what that ends up having to do is that I am taking a population without a college degree, and I'm moving to a population with a college degree, and those two populations look vastly different. Minorities tend to get less represented if on the end of college educated, and that's, you know, it's unfortunate. I know that we're working very hard to overcome that as a country, and luckily the programs we have, I think, are working in many ways and respects. However, if I were to sit there and say, I want a bachelor's degree, I don't want a bachelor's degree for any particular reason other than, you know, I just want to have a bachelor's degree because I was told I have to have a bachelor's degree in order to come to this position. Every other restaurant that I know wants to have a bachelor's degree for managers, so I'm going to require that everyone has to have a bachelor's degree for managers because we want to have high quality around here. You might unintentionally be causing impact to protected classes by doing that. And so that's where they use this 4/5 rule, where they basically say, look, and they're going to take your entire talent labor pool as it's determined through what is really appropriate. So if I go to court and then they talk about the fact that a bachelor's degree is required, I might need to say, okay, I want people to have a bachelor's degree you know, in restaurant management, and that might make a little bit more sense than if I just want to talk about people having, for example, a bachelor's degree in just anything. For example, does a bachelor's degree in philosophy really make you a much better restaurant manager? And again, it's always, you know, I'll give you the lawyer's answer. It depends. What if I'm doing restaurant work and I'm working in a you know, in a club that is you know, seen as a club that specializes in you know, and to be a member of the club, it's like a Socrates society or something of that nature. That would be a very rare circumstance, however. But just to sit there and say, well, we just want them to have a bachelor's degree, you're gonna have to justify it for some reason. Now, for example, in the accounting industry, it's not hard to justify this, and the reason why is because in order to sit for the CPA exam, you have to have 120 credit hours. In order to become a CPA, you have to have 150 hours. And if you have the 150 hours in order to do that, normally most people will go get a bachelor's degree and then they go get a master's degree. So what will end up happening is most organizations will sit there and say, they won't say that we need a bachelor's and a master's degree. They're going to say, if you want to work here as a staff, we're going to require that you have 120 hours of college credit. If you don't have that, you know, if you don't have a bachelor's degree but you got 120 hours, you'll be okay. And for the degree, for the sitting of the CPA exam, you would be okay too. But then they're going to want you, when you know, if you go to become a senior, they're going to want you to have 150 hours, because generally 150 hours is when they want you to be taking the CPA exam and getting licensed, because by the time you make manager, you have to be a CPA in order to sign tax returns. That's why they're going to ask you to do that. So that's kind of how that whole process works out, and I've really gone way into the weeds as a result of it. The only thing you're going to do for this assignment, you're not going to go through that whole justification thing, but you're just going to do the calculations, and so it's going to be much easier for you. And to be honest, as a bachelor's degree holder working in an HR department, this is probably what you would end up doing. You're not going to be asked to come up with, why are we having this problem? Investigate this problem. Normally that's going to be a director of HR, or even more so, sometimes they'll hire legal firms and they'll say, okay, we want you to figure out where our disparate impact is coming from and why it's coming from there. And so you know, when that ends up happening, you know, that's normally not something that you would be doing as a degree holder and as a bachelor's degree holder. Okay, assignment 3, part B. This is where, you know, and it kind of takes a little bit of a different turn from what we talked about in Part A. Part B really is your time to reflect upon your experiences that you've had where you've been learning about these things. Okay, so, and there's a famous, you know, a scholar by the name of David Bowd, a gentleman who was a very good friend of mine, introduced me to him, but, you know, I'm not going to introduce him because I don't have his permission. But David Bowd once talked about how what would happen is you have the preparation of the experience of learning, you have the experience of learning, and then you have the reflection of learning. And if you go through these 3 different experiences and you do them to the fullest each way, you have a very good chance of retaining that knowledge, learning something of that knowledge, and then affecting some kind of positive or negative behavior. Hopefully positive positive. However, if you try to skimp on any of this, for example, you don't do a whole lot of preparation, you have the experience, and then later on you don't do a lot of reflecting, you're probably not going to have learned a whole lot from it. And I think we've seen this a lot. I like to look at it from a perspective of massive events that we have in life. For example, you know, I was fascinated. Somebody had once done it where they had taken David Bowd's idea and said that, well, we'll apply it to, you know, a catastrophe like a hurricane or something of that nature. And for those of you who are in this class that work for Homeland Security, this might be something you've done, because I know FEMA, every time there's a hurricane that takes place, they sit down, they have an after-action report. Where do we go right? Where do we go wrong? And in fact, the whole incident command system was as a result of their after-action analysis of Katrina. So there's some good stuff that can happen as a result of reflection. In your case, because of the way that the class is done, I want you to sort of focus on this whole experience that you've had. How has this made me better in order to make better selections, avoid various impacts that could happen, whether they're disparate or adverse impacts, and then and also how can I, you know, do various things. When I looked at assignment 2, there were several people who had decided that, you know, I would say the good majority of the people selected that the weighted option was the better way to go. There were a couple who basically said, no, I think the unweighted option was. They both made very good logical arguments, and I accepted every one of them. But you know, take some time, do some reflecting on that, and ask yourself some of the, you know, we've given you 6 questions to ask, to answer, and that'll help you in your reflection process. But take this time to really examine what you've done. That's all I've got for this. Remember, it's actually due that Sunday after Thanksgiving. I put it on that weekend as the due date. This time I really wanted to make sure that it was due on that Sunday, and the reason why was, you know, if you have 4 days off, you know, after you've gone to Thanksgiving, and well, God knows, we know what happens in family dinners at Thanksgiving. You know, you might need some relaxation on Friday, and you know, you can take Saturday, especially if you're going to go do Black Friday shopping on Friday. You can then take Saturday and you know, take a relaxing time in order to figure this stuff out. But if you have any questions, reach out to me. I've been getting some emails from several people, and I'm very happy with that. And you know, thank you very much for watching.